Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who is wondering how to shoot her shot. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
Right. Our warning is that we know nothing.
We're Jon Snow over here. We love making references to TV shows that have been off the air for 4 or 5 years.
Oh my God, it's probably going to be my blind date. This week's my blind date is Game of Thrones. Like, hello, have you heard of it? Anyway, this is all to say, Sam and I.
Have you heard the thing about like people asking their husbands, women asking their husbands how often they think about the Roman Empire?
No.
It's a thing on social media right now. I'm not on social media, but people have like shown it to me because they ask their husbands, like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And their husbands to a T are like pretty much every day, which is just wild to me.
Hysterical.
Like consistently, they think a lot about it. That is me, but for Game of Thrones. Like, I'm like, how often do you think about Game of Thrones? And I'm like, probably every 3 hours,
pretty
honestly.
Consistently. Me too, to be honest. Yeah. Like, I compare shows and books to Game of Thrones, to the show and to the book.
No, absolutely.
It's always in the periphery.
That's really real.
Okay, anyway, this is all to say, if it's not abundantly apparent already, that Sam and I don't know what we're talking about. We're not professionals. We're not trained in any of this. So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right, so this is the first episode of the week, so we're going to do a quick check-in topic before we dive into today's letter. The check-in topic I'm actually pretty excited to talk about with you. It's a concept from a sex therapist online that's been like broadly talked about, like the New York Times put out an article on it, etc. And I think it's really interesting. It's called the bristle reaction, and the sex therapist, Vanessa Marin, is the person who coined that term. And basically, you know, in the beginning of your relationship, if you are, sexually active or sexually attracted, you have this honeymoon stage and you're like, oh my God, kissy, touchy, fucky. And
nightmare.
Then that, eventually physical in most or a lot of relationships, eventually physical touch may, lessen over time, especially long-term relationships, or more specifically, physical touch turns into almost exclusively a prelude to sex. Okay. And as a result, some people may develop what this sex therapist calls the bristle reaction when they physically recoil from their partner's touch. Specifically, she's generally talking about long-term relationships, but I'm sure you could apply this in different situations.
Oh, for sure.
So
Absolutely.
according to sex therapist Vanessa Marin, the bristle reaction is an involuntary response. It's subtle, but it can be very confusing and even upsetting to both partners. You know, somebody comes up behind you and gives you a hug and you feel like that urge to recoil. And it is particularly upsetting because it's someone you presumably love and trust, but you feel this like very intense reaction to a very simple touch. And the reasons why she says that it happens, are one, there is some sort of connection in our minds that physical, especially over time, physical touch leads to sex. Do you know what I mean? Like, so we're connecting it as that sort of affection. That person wants something from us. Right. It's sort of a subconscious connection that we make. Another reason why it could happen, particularly for caregivers, is that maybe you're like touched out. Maybe you have a job that's super physical, or you have young children and you're like, I just don't want to be touched anymore. So you feel this like involuntary or like maybe misplaced disgust at being touched by somebody you actually love, Another reason why is especially as we are in more longer relationships, it can be weirdly more vulnerable to initiate sex when you've been together longer. Like it feels like we societally have a hard time talking about sex. We have a hard time asking for it. So we want to like initiate it in these like vague and indirect ways by like hugging for 5 more seconds or like kissing and maybe slipping in the tongue or whatever. And that way, the sex therapist argues, we do those indirect requests for sex via like affection so that we can play it off when it gets rejected. Like, oh, I'm just hugging you or, like whatever.
That's real. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's other reasons for bristle effect. Like separate from this sex therapist's opinion, I think about bristle effect in terms of like, or bristle reaction in terms of maybe you're feeling triggered or maybe your sexual desires they don't line up. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think about when I was younger, because of some like unresolved shit, I became really turned off by people's affection when I knew they wanted to have sex with me. It was like, it like conflated something in my brain, Anyway, so the sex therapist has 3 ways to help approach the bristle reaction. But before I dive into them, just general thoughts from you on this idea.
I deeply relate to this, and I'm surprised that it's a new thing.
Yeah, I was surprised to read that she invented it. I thought it was like, coined the term, I should say.
Yeah, I thought we all knew this was something that happened, but
I
apparently
we were all subconsciously disgusted by our partners.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely something that I have talked to my therapist about like this sort of like, I'm not even thinking about it as just happening, where it's like I tense up when I'm touched for all of these reasons, right? Because like intimacy, like physical intimacy usually leads to sex. And like, as somebody who is like, has a lower sex drive, it's like, oop, I don't want that. Right. Like, or like, oh, we are in like a weird place right now. And then like, you touch me and I'm like, oof, I don't know about that. But I think that like we've been talking a lot on the podcast over the course of the last few months about like the way that disparate sex drives kind of show up in relationships, right? And like how it makes people feel, even though it's like really normal. And there are like, I think, predictable patterns for how people kind of feel when sex drives are different. And I think this bristle response is like definitely like the outcome of both of those things, right? Where the person who doesn't want to necessarily have sex feels like, oh, I need to draw back, and then I feel bad about it, right? Like, ooh, why did I do that? Like, I wasn't even thinking. I just I flinched, right? And then the person who like wants more sex is looking at it and being like, this person literally flinched when I touched them, right? Like, I feel so rejected. I feel like, and it's just, I think it's another one of those like dynamics that we have talked about, where it's like, of course we all have sex drives that are different from each other because we're all different people and different bodies, and that's normal and natural. But obviously there's so much tied into it that feels like even like we're not even thinking about it, right? Like even before we have the chance to process it, our bodies are even like, or like, oh, you know what I mean?
To me, it feels like a nervous system response. It's like, it's so involuntary, and it can be, in my experience, I can have this reaction for somebody who I love, who I trust, who I want sexually, but in the moment, so many things are being conflated or misconstrued. And I think you're totally right to bring up like both perspectives on this, because it can probably be very damaging or insecurity ridden to have somebody flinch when you touch them, especially when you're doing the vulnerable thing, which is trying to initiate sex or even initiate affection. You know what I mean? Even if it's not sex that you're looking for, it can be really vulnerable to have that not received well. Yeah, it's just all really interesting. This is what the sex therapist Marin has to offer in terms of ways to get over this or problem solve around the bristle reaction. You can first, she suggests asking your partner to use their words to initiate sex, which honestly, I'm a huge fan of.
Same.
I know that it's not sexy or it could be. But when life gets more complicated and your relationship gets more, I don't know, mainstream to your life, sometimes you really have to be so direct. This is so true of so many relationship needs. Like, you can't indirectly ask for time alone, or else your partner's going to assume that you're avoiding them or you don't like them. You know, you can't indirectly always ask for sex, or your partner's going to, you know, either miss your advances or feel icky about them or whatever. So Marin just says, recommending that couples initiate sex with their words rather than by touching. So the request is clear. If we're not clear with our communication, that there are so many opportunities to miss each other and miscommunicate. Direct verbal initiation takes any guesswork out of the equation. When you're in the mood to have sex, tell your partner clearly, which I love.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was something that Peter and I had to talk about, like, early on when we moved in with each other, where I was like, I don't know, it feels like every time we kiss, we're like moving towards sex, and I don't like, right? Like, so can we be like really clear about when and how we're doing that? And like, we still do it to this day, where it's like, you know, it's not necessarily like, hey, do you want to have sex? It's like, it's like, hey, I'm really interested in like having sex with you. Like, how are you feeling about it? Right. And then we can sort of like take it from there. And obviously it's not perfect in any way, but at least it makes me feel less like, oh, if we start making out, am I tacitly agreeing to have sex when I like don't want to right now? Right.
Totally. We do the same thing. It's like, do you want to maybe have sex later, or, you know, after the baby goes to bed?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We typically use much more immature terms, you know?
You want fuck later?
No, it's more like slap a tickle. Do you want, Willow calls it snug plus, snugging and snug plus.
Cute. Love that.
We are adults. So anyway, Marin continues to say the second way you can approach the bristle effect is incorporating more touch into your daily life that isn't tied to sex, if that's something that you're interested in. I do too.
This is like
another, I do
it's
too.
like all the things I'm trying, so I feel like very validated.
Yes, totally. Well, and I mean, honestly, we've been talking a lot in my partnership about connection and intimacy because we're so fucking tired, because we have a 1.5-year-old and I have Lyme disease. And so like, you know, our lives are so much negotiation right now in terms of time and schedule and energy, that we find, you know, Willow just said the other day, like, I feel like I can go the whole day without kissing you. And at the end of the day, it makes me sad that I didn't. And I'm over here like, I'm tired. But, you know, trying to carve out and ask for spaces where we can be physically intimate, even if it isn't having sex, you know, just to keep that connection, whatever, to nurture that connection. So Marin writes, another key underlying factor of the bristle reaction is the association with physical touch leading to sex, which is, I know, really relatable to both Sam and I, because, So touching each other more without sex involved helps disentangle this connection. Actually, I saw a TikTok video from this sex therapist in which she says her husband and her try to make out every day. Like, there has to be tongue. It can be like a 5-second kiss.
Yeah.
Or more. But because she said just trying to disentangle that act of intimacy as a stepping stone to sex. And I thought that was really great. Yeah.
Just like stick your tongue in Willow's mouth.
Yeah, just be like,
just like, good night. And you're like,
This is a great time to remind our listeners that you can watch all of the recordings of our episodes for free on YouTube.
That's true.
If you want to get a nice illustration of what was just going down right there. Okay, and the last suggestion that Marin writes is tell your partner your favorite ways to be touched. Another cause of the bristle reaction is being touched in an unwelcome way or in a place you don't like. For example, not everyone will appreciate being smacked on the butt or having their arm or leg grazed. And did you shrug? Sam shrugged at the butt spanking.
The butt spanking's fine.
I like a little tap, you know?
You're just like, a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. She recommends letting your partner know exactly how you'd like to be touched. It's easier and more fun for you to share your favorite ways to be touched, rather than listing all the ways that they're doing it wrong, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's real.
So, to recap, if you find yourself involuntarily bristling at your partner's touch, know that this doesn't automatically mean you're no longer in love or attracted to them. Quite often, it's an indicator that there's some underlying unexpressed emotion at play, not totally atypical in a long-term relationship. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to the article that I'm referencing right now on wellandgood.com about the bristle reaction, or you can find the coiner, the person who coined the term, online on TikTok and whatnot, and her name is Vanessa Marin.
Oh, great. I love that.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm just really surprised that this is a new term, mostly because I think I've been living with it for so long that I'm like,
I know.
Oh, I knew this thing about myself. Like, did we not? Oh, I guess more people have it, but it's good to know that it's not like uniquely me, you know, like that there are other people out there who are like also like, ugh.
It's comforting for me to read about, because I think I used to associate that feeling with sexual trauma. Do you know? Like, I used to associate it exclusively with, I'm conflating someone's desire with past negative sexual experiences. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is totally could be the case in certain circumstances. But like Vanessa writes, you know, it can be a relationship that you love, that you feel safe and trusting in, and that our nervous systems just go wild on their own. You know, you're talking to somebody with an anxious attachment style, and I just know that my brain and my body and my nerves can react in certain ways. And it's comforting to be like, okay, the alarm bell's going off in my head, or the ick feeling that I have right now isn't indicative of a brokenness within me or a brokenness in my relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's a deeply understandable response to connections that our brain is making because of our past experience, right? Like that. Cool. And it's like, instead of being like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person for bristling when my partner touched me, right? It's like, oh no, this is like a really normal thing to be happening. So how do we want to move forward knowing that this is what's going on, right? Like, not beating ourselves up, but instead being like, no, this is really normal. So like, cool. Maybe we should have a conversation about physical intimacy without sex, right? Or maybe I should talk to my partner about the fact that like, ooh, when you grab my butt like that, like it makes me uncomfortable. Can you put your hand on my arm instead? Or like whatever it is, right? Like, none of this is so insurmountable, or there's nothing like so deeply shamefully wrong with us, right? Like, it's just like, oh no, this is just a thing that we need to navigate through our relationships. That's entirely normal and understandable.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, let's get into today's letter. So today's letter comes from friend Zone, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing from the left coast. Dear Sierra and Sam, I ascribe much of a healing over the last 2 years to your podcast. Thank you for getting me through a pandemic and a number of roller coaster life transitions with my sanity somewhat intact. I am a 35-year-old cis straight woman who is writing to you with a conundrum, portions of which you have addressed in prior letters, but I think overall is kind of a novel topic. I am in the midst of a crush, the part where that term actually gets its name, in that I am realizing that things are likely not going to pan out with this person. I've had a smoldering crush on my friend and coworker, cis male, early 40s, for close to the last year. It started out very innocent and ballooned in late winter, early spring, to something that has intermittently set my mental health and insecurities reeling. I haven't had feelings like this for somebody probably since high school, and forgot what this can feel like. It's rare for me to find a guy that I feel this strongly about. We're talking once in a blue moon type shit. The water started to boil mid-spring after I offered a few subtle hints that I was interested, and I received what seemed to be subtle green lights from him. but nothing of substance really transpired beyond a couple solo hangouts and a drive to the airport. And after I returned from an international trip, it seemed things had cooled completely. I was scared shitless to make an overt gesture, as the stakes seemed high given that we worked together and spent time outside of work with our mutual friends. I temporarily left our mutual job early this summer to go back to school, and I was hopeful that any reservations we had would evaporate and that the flirtations would resume and potentially lead to something. However, towards the end of my time at our job, I found out through the grapevine that he was likely dating someone. This was never officially confirmed. I got busy distracting myself, briefly dated someone else, which didn't last long. Then the texting started again, very subtly, and my spirits soared that maybe now things would work out, but alas, they seem to have subsided again. If this were a person I had met on the apps, I would have less trouble taking these mixed signals as a no and move on with my life. My conundrum is this. I have often been told that I'm hard to read by men I date, and if I had $1 for every time I am told that I come off as aloof, I could retire early. I am an introvert, Enneagram 5, quiet at baseline, and fall somewhere on the avoidant end of the attachment spectrum. However, I have scored in all 3 categories depending on which test I take. Also, Sam, are we the same person? Therefore, what if I have been sending mixed signals myself? I tend to downplay my emotions even more when I feel insecure or nervous around someone, which I do around this person, and I worry that I have made things confusing for him and that he lost interest for that reason. Obviously, the only way to really know would be to ask. However, this worries me greatly, seeing as how I will be re-entering our job in a little less than a year, and I would hate to make things uncomfortable at work and for our mutual friends. Plus, I will never forget a piece of advice that my mom once told me: never let a guy know how much you like him unless you're sure that he likes you more. Also, the whole "if he was into me, he would reach out and make it known" advice of our generation guides a lot of my dating philosophy. TLDR, what advice do you have for a hard-to-read girl who is afraid that her hard-to-readness has convinced her crush that she isn't interested? Anyway, thank you for considering my situation. As many readers have mentioned, just putting this into words has alleviated some of the mental burden. Sincerely, friend-zoned? ?
Thank you so much for writing Friend-Zoned and for trusting us with this letter. Nothing hurts more than a unfulfilled, possibly unrequited crush. Mm-hmm. This might be one of the only instances in which Sam and I agree on the shoot your shot call.
I think we have agreed before.
Maybe like twice in 5 years. Anyway, we will give your advice and tell you to shoot your shot or not in just 1 minute. First, we got to take a very quick break.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. Friend Zone, I got one piece of advice for you, which is to just shoot your shot, babe. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, and I mean this lovingly. Men are stupid and are so often unable to pick up on subtle signs from people about whether or not people like them, right? And I know this because, like, the straight men in my life have told me how stupid they are when it comes to, like,
oh my God,
understanding if people like them.
So funny.
I think here's the thing. I believe that you have been subtly putting down things. I believe that he has maybe been reciprocating some of those things. And I don't know why things have cooled off, whether that's because you're hard to read, because he's in a relationship, all of this stuff. But like you said in your letter, you're not going to know until you ask. So I think you should just ask him. And it doesn't have to be crazy and intense. You don't have to, like, it doesn't have to be intense, right? Like, you don't have to be like, hey, I've been in love with you for a year now, and I think that we are perfect. Yeah, right? Like, we are perfect for each other, right? You know, it can just be like hey, I've really enjoyed our one-on-one time, right? I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I would love to go on a date with you. How would you feel about that, right? That's fine, right? Like, I know that it sounds really scary, and I if I were in your shoes, I would absolutely be also scared of this, right? Like, it is easier said than done to do this. And I think that you owe it to yourself the clarity to know whether or not this person is into you. And I think that you owe it to him also to, like, let him know that you would like to date him, because you are a catch. And if he is ready for that or, like, open to that, then he deserves to have a shot to get to know you in all of the different ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, just to hype you up, let's explore really quickly what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen here. Because I feel like we're, especially now that I know everything about you because you are Sam, you might be overthinking right now.
Sure.
And you might be thinking like, oh, I don't want to risk the friendship or whatever. Like, I guess what I want to say is we are all rejected. Rejection is inevitable. Not all people are for us. All the common JBU-isms that we've been saying for the last 5 years. The worst that could happen is that maybe you feel self-conscious because you're rejected. Maybe he doesn't want to be friends anymore. But it sounds like you don't really want to be friends with this person.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Sounds like you want to date him. Mm-hmm. And it's okay that those two things are different things. It doesn't make your attraction to him any less pure or anything or any less deserving.
For sure.
I feel like if we take the whole thing, if we like shake it out and be like, okay, it's not awkward, it's not scary, it's just a part of human connection, is being vulnerable, putting out your feelings and seeing if they're reciprocated. And if they're not, continue that shake off and just be like, okay, now I know I can move forward in my life with this knowledge. We all get rejected. We all have feelings that are unreciprocated. We are not for everyone because of personalities or attraction or timing, or maybe he has another girlfriend, or
right.
It literally could be 1,000 reasons that have very little to do or nothing to do with your quality of as a human or whatnot.
For sure.
I know it's a way, like, trust me, have I ever successfully given myself like a chill out, be cool, and just shoot your shot pep talk? Absolutely not. I have always escalated it, overthought it, been anxious, whatever. But I do think, if I ever were to be dating again, this is what I would do. I would just try to like bring myself back to earth and remind myself that, making connection is also about risking rejection. They are hand in hand. You cannot, as you have seen from the last year, you cannot make that connection by being being withdrawn or being vague or, you got to lay it out there. You got to risk it. You got to say, I'm interested in you. And I totally agree with Sam. Like, I would even add that I think it's really charming and self-aware of you to say that, you have been told that you're a little aloof or indirect, or that, like, I think you could even acknowledge that in a really charming way and say, hey, this might be a little out of the blue, or maybe it's expected, but I've been told that I'm a little hard to read, and I just wanted you to know that I have feelings for you, and I would be interested in going on a date with you. And you can even add, I heard a rumor that you are seeing somebody. So if this is unreciprocated, or, or if you are with somebody else, I apologize for my timing. I just wanted you to know. I just wanted to shoot my shot. Like, literally, that's
for sure.
So harmless in that moment.
Absolutely. And I know that, like, if you and I are that similar, right? I know that there's also like there might be this fear of like being perceived as silly or like overly emotional, right?
Say it,
like,
Sam. Yeah.
There's this like, I often experience this feeling of like, oh no, if I let somebody see the like inside of me, then they're going to like think I'm silly or stupid or unable to like handle myself. Right. And that is so untrue based on my experience of other people. You know what I mean? Where it's like, when I show people the soft, gooey underside of me, they're usually like, oh, okay, thank you. Like, that's great. And if they're not interested in it, then they are often like very respectful of it. Right. And this fear that you have also that like, you're going to make things awkward for your friends. Like, you and this person are both adults, right? Who can like handle what it looks like to be in continued relationship or acquaintanceship with each other. And also, what I would hope is that your friends are also adults who can like handle the idea that there is like a situation happening between two people that doesn't need to be like world ending, but that they can like sort of take into account. And I know the idea of like people taking something about you into account feels like you're being like a burden to them or like that you are somehow like displaying a weakness that makes you deeply uncomfortable. And right, like that's not what's happening here. And I'm saying this lovingly to you because this is what I would need to hear myself if I were
notes, Sam.
in a similar situation, right? Like none of the people in your life are going to see this as like a burden. They're just going to be like, oh, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like they're going to handle it because they're adults who are capable of navigating social situations with people that are nuanced and complex because they've been doing that. And so like, and I also want to say to you, like, even with all of that, even if you're still like, I don't know, what a perfect time to do it. You've got a whole fucking year to figure out, like, or at least almost a year to figure out how you're going to move forward if this person rejects you, right? Like, you've got a year to figure out how you're going to manage your own feelings about him, what you need in that situation. You're going to have a whole year for you to like figure out how you're going to navigate these friend groups again and like go back to work with each other, right? Like you have so much time to figure that out. So like, why not now? You know, like even giving into our worst sort of like fears or narratives about our own vulnerability and what that means about us as people, right? Like you still have so much time to figure it out. Like that's what I would tell myself if I were in a similar situation and be like, well, I got to do it now because if I do it like 2 weeks before we're supposed to go back to work, the whole world's going to implode. So like, let me give myself 9 months to figure out how we're going to navigate the situation if he says no for whatever reason.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here thinking about like how we deny ourselves our humanity by expecting like perfection from ourselves. And that perfection doesn't just extend to our behaviors and our performance. It extends to other people's perceptions of us. That's why like people pleasing is a thing. Is that like we can't disappoint other people or be rejected by other people or be unwanted by other people because it means we're failing. You know, we're failing as a person because we are not like all desirable. And that's just redonkulous.
It is.
It's just, you know, so take a deep breath. You know, you could even like Sam and I won't spend the rest of the episode like theorizing all the ways that this could go. But just to give you two pictures, he could text you back and say, wow, thank you so much for sharing this. I've had a crush on you for a year. I'm not dating that person anymore. And I'd love to go out. And the other side, he could say, oh, thank you so much for sharing. I'm actually seeing somebody right now and I see you more as a friend and a colleague, but thank you for sharing your opinion. I hope this doesn't change our relationship. Those are two options, right? And you are perfectly capable of handling both of those things. You
absolutely are, which is what's wonderful about you, right? Like that you are so capable of managing and handling things as they come up. And both of those are fine endings or fine beginnings, depending on the situation for like what's going to happen here, right? Like the worst case scenario as we're thinking about it, which I don't know, is like, he's so deeply uncomfortable that he like talks about all his friends with you, like whatever is like not actually going to happen, you know? And like, sometimes it does help to like, to go through some of those like worst case scenarios and be like, what? I know this man. Is this how he would behave in this situation? Like, no, and absolutely not.
To your point, you said, you know, either of those are endings or beginnings, or think about them as both as beginnings, because one could be a beginning of a relationship. The other one is the beginning that you get from perspective, the beginning that you get from, okay, I can finally close this chapter. I can put these feelings away. You know, this is a new beginning. Like you deserve to shoot your shot. TLDR, absolutely. Shoot your shot.
Do it. Just do it.
And let us know how it goes.
Yes, please do.
All right, my darling. Thank you so much for listening and for trusting us with this letter. We hope that this helps, and we hope that you shoot your shot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for writing. We love you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you want more content from us, or if you would like ad-free episodes, those ad-free episodes are so good, you all. You can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you get ad-free episodes as well as access to all of our back catalog of Patreon episodes. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship meme, or submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our cute JBU merchandise. Yes, that's the end of my line.
Love it. Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast. And remember, you do not have to be perfectly desirable to all people in the world. You don't have to be agreeable to everyone. You don't have to be liked by everyone. You're allowed to be rejected. You're allowed to be unwanted. You don't have to keep a clean slate. You know, you can live this life. You can get a little messy. And who knows, maybe you find a connection in it all. And if all else fails,
just break up.